I'm Spencer Chiak. You're listening to KEDT 90.3, your community-owned station. On the phone with Congressman Vicente Gonzalez, running for re-election. Representative Gonzalez, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having us. Good to be here.
A few weeks left in the campaign. Just overall, how are you feeling?
I actually feel pretty good. We've knocked on over 150,000 doors with a majority of positive IDs and a lot of good responses. And we are, running a full campaign the way we do every cycle. It feels good out here.
For you running for re-election, what are some things you're hoping to focus on should you be re-elected?
Well, the first thing that we got to focus on is keeping track of some housekeeping issues that are important to our region, like Social Security and Medicare for our seniors. That's on the chopping block to be cut by some of the proposals that we are seeing from the other side of the aisle. One of them is raising the age of Social Security to 69 and raising the age of Medicare to 67. Well, as you all know, people aren't living any longer here in South Texas these days and even across the country. And we really cannot afford to raise ages on these hardworking Americans. And we need to focus on ways that we can assure that Social Security and Medicare is viable for our seniors to live a dignified life in their golden years. And I never thought that we would be fighting so hard for something that makes so much sense. Another top issue that is I consider a housekeeping issue is Title I educational funding that we've had since 1965, I believe. It's brought billions of dollars to our schools in South Texas. Any school that has 40% poverty or more qualifies for these resources. I've brought billions of dollars of these monies down to my district. And this past year, there was actually a bill in appropriations that passed subcommittee to get rid of Title I funding, something that we used to take for granted. And it levels the playing fields in school districts across South Texas. I don't think there's a school district south of San Antonio that doesn't qualify for these resources. And it would be greatly impacted if we allowed that to happen. On the other end, we have inflation that has improved, but we're still battling it. We're trying to get inflation down to 2%. We were at 9.8% in June of 2021. This past September, we clocked in at 2.8. So you see, we were paying $4 and $5 a gallon in gas. Right now, we're paying $2.50 to $3, depending where you are. Food prices have come down, but not to where they need to be. But I think that there's some downward pressure, and things are moving in the right direction. So we also need to address some of the corporate greed that's been allowed to gouge the American people and the American consumer. We are no longer dealing with the supply line issues that we had during COVID. And there's an abundance of just about everything. We need to figure out why some of these major corporations around the world and multinationals insist on not lowering their prices to be affordable to not only Americans, people around the world. When we talk about inflation, we talk about it if it's only here in the United States, but this inflation is a global inflation that we've been dealing with since COVID.
For Medicare, why do you think for some the answer is raising the age, and how would you like to see it fixed? Well,
let me tell you. We have a foreign debt problem that we need to fix in this country, and a deficit issue that we need a budget that we need to balance. And they're looking for places to cut costs. I just don't believe Social Security and Medicare should be one of the places that they look to cut costs in. There are so many other government wastes and so many different projects around the country and around the world where we spend money. And I think we need to look at places like that before we ever touch Medicare and Social Security for seniors.
Education all around the coastal bend certainly has been a highlighted topic for a lot of Democrats. I was curious, looking on your campaign website, you talked about bringing debt relief for students. How would you tackle that, and why is that so important to you?
Student loans, yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've promoted debt relief for college students and even creating programs for college students to be able to graduate debt-free. And you can have the instinct of some people saying, well, that's a freebie. We're giving money away to people. Well, we're not. When we educate people with just 2 years of education, the average American out of high school earns between $24,000 and $30,000 a year. With just 2 years of education, you bring them up to an average of $60,000. They go from paying 10% a year, which is $2,000 to $3,000, to paying 20% on a $60,000 income, which is about $12,000 to $15,000 a year. So in the first 3 to 5 years, the more educated population pays back 100% of their educational investment that we make. Also, we will have, obviously, a more educated workforce, a more educated society, and it's just the right thing to do for the American people is to give them the best education in the world right here at home and invest not only in college and universities, but technical schools, get kids that are coming out of high school to become welders, nurses, electricians. There are so many technical jobs that are well-paid jobs that will put a roof over your head and food on the table in a very dignified way. And I think it's in the best interest of our country to educate young people that are coming out of high school.
From education to immigration, certainly a hot button topic here in Texas. What steps would you like to be seen taken going forward with the reform? There was a bipartisan bill earlier this year. Critics of it, certain people have called it a do-nothing bill. Was that something you supported, and what would you like to see done?
Well, let me tell you, the bipartisan border bill was far from a do-nothing bill. It was a bill that would have resolved a lot of issues. It would have brought 1,100 new asylum officers to the border to interview asylees who many of them do not qualify for asylum and could be returned home right away. But if you don't have even the manpower to go through the initial interview, then people are just being let into this country. It also brought in hundreds of new immigration judges to process these claims. Right now, people are having to wait 4 to 5 to 6 years before they have their very initial immigration hearing after being let into the country without an interview on an asylum claim. I mean, the system is broken. What I've been proposing is something called the Safe Zone Act. And what the Safe Zone Act does, it creates safe zones in Guatemala, Panama. Now with the safer country of El Salvador, we can do El Salvador, where under my bill, people who want to come to the United States and ask for asylum, they must go to these safe zones and file for an asylum claim there. And we do it in conjunction with the host country, and we process the asylum claim. And if we're going to turn them down, we turn them down at that juncture. And if we're going to allow them in, you give them a document where they can go to the airport and fly to their final destination. Even under the credible fear standard that we have right now, which is very low and I don't agree with, but even if we're going to use that standard, we should use this process because it does two things. It takes the pressure off our southern border, and it eliminates the cartels out of the equation. Cartels have enriched themselves by billions of dollars trafficking humans to our southern border. And we need to come up with an idea, out-of-the-box idea that we haven't done before that works better than what we've been doing. We need to find ways to discourage people from wanting to come to our southern border and get in the way it's happened. And I say this as a Democrat. I've been one of the most critical Democrats in the country on the issues on the border. But I have to say, the border problem is not a Democratic or Republican problem. It's an American problem that requires bipartisan solutions. And I've joined a group of Democrats and Republicans trying to find those bipartisan solutions. You're not going to resolve problems on the extreme right and the extreme left. We need to come together in the center and for the American people with common sense ideas that work. If we keep doing what we've been doing, we're going to continue getting the same results that we've had, and it's been tough. Now, I have to say, after President Trump intervened on that really good border bill that was in the Senate, that he killed it because he wanted to campaign on it in November. He didn't want a fixed border right now, which it turned out to be fixed. A lot of it is because of President Biden's executive order that created more conditions and created more situations where we can actually close the border that activated Mexico to doing a lot more. We need to continue engaging and pressuring Mexico to do their part to guard their southern border, to process asylum claims on their own, and to find ways to either incorporate people who immigrate, they're looking for a safer place, look for it in some of the other countries that they're crossing before they get to us, and just come up with different ideas of how we're going to alleviate the problems on our border.
I did want to ask about the executive order. A part of the bipartisan bill was giving Homeland Security the ability to shut down the border effectively after a certain number of average entries per day. That would have been a unilateral power for the president to be able to do. And as a member of the legislative branch, certainly there's been a lot of discussion after Trump versus the United States about just how much power the executive has and the legislature. What do you make of that, and how do you think this is something that needs to be looked at more closely, and how would you combat that if you do believe it's an issue?
Yes, well, first of all, I don't think we should be legislating by executive orders, right? I think Congress needs to do its job, and the administration, whether it's Democrat or Republican, needs to allow Congress to do their job. The problem that is Congress has been so divisive on immigration and border issues, and the conversation has been hijacked by the extreme left and the extreme right, that we haven't been able to pass any type of immigration reform or any kind of meaningful immigration policy. And the way I feel and the way I call it is, I think for the last 20, maybe even 30 years, American immigration policy has been illegal immigration. And that's how we deal with it. We control illegal immigration instead of legislating different paths to immigration. I mean, without a doubt, I think most people agree that we need labor. We have 6 to 8 million open jobs in this country that we are not able to fill. And some of them are the hardest jobs in the country that Americans just are not lining up to take. We're also not having children, and we're not reproducing, and we're not growing our population. In order for us to continue growing our economy, we need to grow our population. And I don't see any other method of doing that than through some sort of immigration. We just need to make it an orderly process. And I don't think I or anyone else is totally against immigration. I think we just are looking for some kind of orderly process to deal with migrants on our southern border.
It is. I do find it rather interesting, too, that immigration's certainly been an issue for a long time. Women's reproductive health also. Lack of legislation has resulted in a major shift. Just why do you think certain things like immigration or women's reproductive health, why do you think it's so hard for bipartisan issues that most Americans would agree on? Why do you think it's so hard for that to go through?
Well, I think those are two policies that have taken extreme positions within both parties, one on the extreme left, the other on the extreme right. Both of them, in my opinion, are wrong. And we need to create working groups of bipartisan members that are common sense folks, middle of the road, that are not trying to cheerlead for their party, but are actually trying to do something right for their country and want to sit with members of the other side of the aisle to come up with policies that make sense, that solve the problems that we're dealing with. On reproductive rights, women, I think, in this country are really upset. 40% of American women have zero access to reproductive care, and Texas is leading the charge in that respect. My opponent has been pushing really hard on these policies even before Roe v. Wade. She celebrated Roe v. Wade, and right now we have women dying in emergency rooms and in hospital rooms in the state of Texas and having to struggle to get across the border. Get across the border of the state, whether it's New Mexico or actually Mexico or some other state. But I can tell you in South Texas, I recently had a family call me of a woman who had a baby dying inside of her and could not get the care she needed from a hospital or a doctor in our community because they're afraid of going to jail and being indicted and being shut down. So this young lady actually had to go across into Mexico to get the care she needed to save her life. That is just as un-American as I can imagine, that we're forcing people to go to other countries to get health care that we should be providing here in our communities.
You and your opponent both have women's rights discussed on your respective websites. She focuses on Title IX and women in sports, and you discuss equal pay and other topics. Why do you think there's such a difference between the two?
First of all, let's make it clear. When we're talking about women's rights and women losing reproductive freedom in the state and in the country, it affects vast amounts of women across our state and across our country. She's talking about young boys playing sports with young girls, which I am 100% in opposition, right? And most Americans and most people around the world are as well. It's a very rare situation that they've found to try to promote their campaign on, but it's something that is very, very rare. In fact, I've never heard of it once happening in the entire state of Texas, and I've never heard of it once happening in my congressional district. But I could tell you what has happened many times in my district. I have women dying in hospital rooms and in emergency rooms, and a family calling me because they're having to move their daughter to get care in Mexico so she doesn't die in a hospital in the United States. That is impacting thousands of women here in South Texas and across the state.
Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything that we haven't discussed that you were hoping to?
No, I think that should cover it.
Representative Gonzalez, thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
This has been a KEDT Election Coverage Special. Tune in to the KEDT 90.3 FM Mayoral Roundtable on October 30th at 9 a.m. And follow us on social media at Your KEDT on Facebook, Instagram, and X.